Howdy, and welcome back to Film Asterisk. And we have a very special episode today. An episode that has been nearly 4 years in the making, as this was recorded summer of 2020. But with the madness of 2020 that summer, I never got around to editing it. So it officially kind of became our lost episode. And I was kind of going back through the archives, and I thought I had lost this audio file, so I really did think it was lost media until I discovered it randomly in a folder it shouldn't be in on my Google Drive. So I decided to give it a listen, and I decided to edit it down, and we have an episode featuring me and my sister Julia discussing a film that, as of now, is about to celebrate its anniversary. 1964's Goldfinger, the classic Sean Connery James Bond film. So, without further ado, enjoy the lost episode of Film and Film Asterisk. And welcome back to Film Asterisk. This is the substitution for Film And. While Connor and I are separated, he's still in Indiana. We miss you, buddy. But I'm once again joined by my sister, Julia. Thank you so much for being on this week.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again.
And we were racking our brains what we were going to talk about this week and something we want to discuss. And we are fresh off watching the 1963 Bond film Goldfinger. Classic, I think considered one of the better of the early Bond films, I would say.
So I've been told.
Yeah, so we've been told.
It's, with a grain of salt.
Yes, many grains of salt. But it basically follows James Bond investigating Goldfinger and eventually discovering his plan. Heavy spoilers coming up here. Well, I guess maybe medium spoilers. No, heavy spoilers.
Probably heavy spoilers.
His plan to break into Fort Knox and irradiate the gold supply of the United States for 57 years. And considering that the movie came out in 1963 and 57 years later is this year.
Well, he did actually end up correcting Bond and said that it was 58 years, not 57.
It was this year, 57 years.
Well, in case there's any criticism from your wide online viewership.
Pretty much our only listenership is, if I remember, no, it's the two leading ladies of Booksmart who listen. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Beanie Feldstein, especially. Thank you so much. Who else did we mention in the past? We think Anya Taylor-Joy listens to our program. And maybe Robert Eggers. I think he also listens. Anyways, 57 years later, this is when the gold of Fort Knox would be unirradiated at this point. So we thought it was very fitting to go back to this movie and discuss some of our favorite points, some of our more critical points. So I will let our guest start it off. Thoughts, impressions, feelings, emotions. Let's talk about it, Julia.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me preface by saying that the majority of Bond films I've seen have been the most recent ones, being with Daniel Craig in them. And I think I saw one Pierce Brosnan one at some point, but I honestly couldn't remember which one it was. So that's kind of been my only frame of reference in terms of like comparing it and, to other Bond films or even really the genre as a whole. So I kind of was going in blind a little bit, it felt like.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't really have many preconceived notions other than Austin Powers,
Yeah.
which I coincidentally watched last week with my boyfriend. And it was, now I feel like I could appreciate Austin Powers more after seeing Goldfinger, because obviously there's a lot of references to it, as well as,
absolutely.
the James Bond series as
Yeah.
a whole. But I was kind of like, oh, so that's where that comes from.
That's where it comes from, yeah.
That makes sense now. It wasn't just Austin Powers being Austin Powers.
Yeah.
But, so yes, anyways, I think my overall impression is that I thought I guess you could say cinematography, for the time, was good. I mean, you can obviously tell it's from the 60s. Like, that's definitely a thing. But, I thought that the range of, like, scenes that they shot and the amount of extras that they had to use, I mean, you can tell it's a pretty big budget film. And I appreciated that. And I appreciated the practical effects as well as the props and costuming, all of that. I think there's a lot of work that went into it. I will say, however, I was not incredibly impressed with the plot. If the aim of the plot for us was us to be impressed with James Bond, I was not left with awe or amazement.
Yeah, I think
with the protagonist.
The biggest thing
to be honest,
we talked about was the fact that James Bond does not do much in this movie.
Not only does he not do much, but he doesn't do much to service the plot, which is the fact that Goldfinger is going to radiate all of the gold in America.
I love how far-fetched
I love... Well, okay, let me, back up. I love that plot.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's ridiculous enough to be like, wow, that else...
Yeah.
maybe that could work. I can see your
Bond
plan there.
Bond really serves it. He's not the linchpin of a plot. He doesn't move the plot forward. He's there as, the character the audience follows to see the plot happening.
Right, exactly.
And that's pretty much the only purpose he serves.
But that seems sad, because the point is that we're supposed to be amazed by this, international man of mystery, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we should be more impressed with him. To be honest with you, from beginning to end, I was kind of questioning his prowess as a spy in the first place. I just think of that one scene when he walks down to, Q's lair, or his laboratory, probably. He's not really a lair, he's not evil. So, his lab, and he's, not at all interested or impressed with any of these very useful inventions. And, again, maybe there's some back history there from the other previous movies that I missed, that there should be more sparring.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're going to be, this world-renowned spy who takes on, the worst villains, you should be interested in learning how to use your tools to go up against these people, instead of rolling your eyes, being how long are we going to be? What's the point of all... And, being kind of mean to the man who's making all of these things for you that end up being used for literally every situation that he falls into.
Yeah, because he eventually does use all of them when he goes to Switzerland.
Exactly.
When he's getting chased by Goldfinger's men.
It's almost like Q knew what he was getting into.
It's almost like the screenwriter knew he was going to need exactly what he needed, and he gave it to him.
And it wasn't even that, but then they put people in the situations for them to be used.
Yes. Since this is the third movie of the kind of Bond series, it's early.
Is it really?
It's early on. Yeah.
Oh, so it's one of the first then.
Yeah, it's early on.
I didn't know that.
In that sense. So it hasn't really fallen into an archetypal plot device where it's pretty much after this movie, every Bond movie kind of feels the same. It hits the same plot points. But also, that's very purposeful.
But does the Bond get better?
No. Well, eventually, in 40 years.
I'm really questioning why they chose him. He just womanizes and very easily falls into the traps of women repeatedly. You'd think that M would be this man that I've chosen to go on these missions. Yes, he is perfect for all of them, despite the slew of gorgeous henchwomen.
He does eventually, he does some cool stuff and he gets the job done, but does he get the job done?
Wait, no, hold up. What job is he supposed to get done exactly? Because let's look at Goldfinger. I'm not going to talk about any other film at this point because I don't have that frame of reference. Let's only talk about in Goldfinger? What exactly does he get done? Because for me, I'm looking at this plot, right? And he's sent to take down Goldfinger. They don't exactly know what his plot is, but as he's investigating, he will firstly falls into the arms of a woman who is related to the person. Like she's literally working for the man that he's trying to track down, and then he gets karate chopped in the back and passes out because sure.
I mean, let's be honest. I just want to say this though. Odd Job of all the bodyguard characters that have existed and kind of like the muscle men of the Bond universe, he's got to be one of the best.
Oh, you mean
serves a good Odd Job, absolutely. I mean,
wait, that's his name, Odd Job?
Yeah, it's that iconic hat on the statue scene. Shwing, thunk, just chops off a statue head. Yes. But yeah, no, he definitely.
But then, like, I'm also saying, like, you know, he then gets captured by Goldfinger, despite all the fancy devices that Q gave him, which maybe if he was paying better attention, he'd use them better.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe when he's in spy school, he could have paid more attention. But anyways, and he gets captured, right? And he's about to be lasered in half, and then he talks his way out of it, which is good for him. That's good. Like, yeah. So that's good that he was able to do that. And then he basically, like, that is the first third, almost probably halfway through the movie.
Oh, it's
a little
the first
more than
half.
First half. And then he just
kind of sits around.
He just sits around and observes.
Oh no, he takes notes and sticks them in a dude's pocket and fails at that.
And fails to actually send them to...
I mean, like, really? The only reason the plot happens is because he turned on his tracker and just showed up at Goldfinger's place.
It doesn't take any skill whatsoever.
So really, it's just a matter of the CIA and MI6 just waiting for Goldfinger to do something illegal.
He tries to send that message of the exact location, exact time, exact like equipment that will be used to take down Fort Knox. And the guy who has the message gets crushed in a car compactor.
Yeah, Mr. Solo, yeah.
So then, how do they find out? Because at the end, they're all there and ready to go.
I honestly forget. I feel
it doesn't explain it.
Did we miss it? I feel
no, we didn't miss it. Like it did, I was looking for it. As far as I can tell, we don't know how or why they knew anything. Unless the two men in the binoculars were able to devise something. But then they wouldn't know, like, the specific place and time. And then, like, they knew that there was going to be a bomb.
That's the
like,
thing.
What? How did they know that information?
All they did was track James Bond. And there's no way they could know that he would be at Fort Knox and get there before him. Because they show up at Fort Knox and they pretend to be unconscious. And then they wake up and it's like, oh, my God. But yeah, I don't...
How does that even make sense? Like, how did they not get knocked out by the gas? Like, did they... What? They didn't even have gas? Okay.
This is exactly what I'm talking about, you know?
But anyways, despite that, the kicker for me is when it comes to James Bond's, like, critical moment as a man of intelligence and whatever, like, ability to take on situations at a whim, you know, he's got, like, 10 seconds left on the clock. He's faced with the atomic bomb that might go off. He's staring at it, looking at it, trying to figure out what to do. And he's like, well, these wires look good.
And of course, maybe.
And you know what? I'm sure, like, bomb disabling was not in spy school. So I'm not saying he should have known. But the fact that
he slept in that morning.
The point, yeah, exactly.
When he was supposed to learn how to defuse a bomb.
Yeah. And so then... It just, like, this is the moment he's supposed to, like, save the day, right? Like, that's kind of the point of his character, at least so I thought. And then his American buddy comes in and literally flicks what appears to be an on-off switch to the bomb and disables it immediately before James Bond would have probably made it explode.
I mean, it is
so
really
he literally just does not do anything.
It's the least Bond film.
Okay, so this is the exception then, you say?
I would say so. I mean, for me, I think I have seen every Bond film except maybe 3 or 4. And that's pretty much like the Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan ones. Because I've seen 1 or 2 of those and they are... Stay away, folks. I'm personally not a fan of those. Kind of cringy for the 80s and 90s Bond. Sure. But... Yeah, I think this is. I mean, I think the biggest issue with Bond is the fact that he is such a passive character, and not in the way
Really
where like a
is.
passive character can be used as like a device. It's just he just kind of services the audience to like, here, I'm showing you the movie by existing in a place, you know, and like he's got a couple tricks up his sleeve, but he's like the thing is he equally is like. Okay, he got out of that scrape. Oh, he figured out this stuff. And then his execution of like trying to stop anything doesn't really happen. You know, like he breaks out of his cell like by climbing on the ceiling and doing it like super craftily, and like the bodyguard like comes in like what, and then he knocks him out. And then
then
he
he
goes
gets
and
captured.
he takes the notes, and like he listens
go
in on the
nowhere.
meeting, which goes nowhere basically.
And then he gets captured again.
Yep. So
Where was his awareness?
yeah, that's a good question. Where was his awareness?
He was. Well, no, I'm not going to say it, but. I'm sorry. It just. The name of Goldfinger's henchwoman. Just,
Oh, that
I can't-
the next important
yeah.
thing to bring up is
Yeah.
kind of like if we're discussing these archetypal characters like the Bond. Like I think every Bond movie, even if it's played by a different Bond character, whether it's Connery or Roger Moore or Dalton or Brosnan or Craig or George Lazenby, not forgetting you, buddy. You were in there too. You got one movie. But seriously, even Connery in different movies plays Bond a little differently each time. You know?
Well, yeah, which would make sense. I wouldn't
He's
expect
not
anything
playing
less.
James
Yeah.
Bond. He's playing the archetypal James Bond character, you know, that we've like come to know. And like that changes from actor to actor and movie to movie. So when we're discussing archetypes, it's also important to discuss the Bond girl of the movie, or like the leading lady of the movie, who is Pussy Galore.
Pussy galore. Thinking about
But,
this
yeah.
film specifically, I liked how she more or less had agency over her own actions and was skilled as a female. I don't hate to say that, just pilot. She was a pilot. Don't need to like gender the profession. So like it's just. So in that way, she was impressive because she was skilled and independent.
Yeah,
Well,
like,
she said, and she was like,
it
she was-
elevated her above other women we
right.
see in the film, and even like just other characters we see, because like
Yeah.
she's the pilot. She's like kind of the second hand man to Goldfinger in a way, because like the plan can't happen without her.
Right.
But she also uses like her beauty and her smarts to help execute the plan,
Exactly.
which is good. But at the same time, it's like all of her interactions with Bond are like
cringy.
so cringy, and
Well, like,
like
that's the
don't,
sad
like-
part, is that like not only is she a skilled pilot, she exudes intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
She upfront says that she's like knows what he's at and just blatantly ignores without even like the coy sort of like still come and get me. She's just like, whatever, dude, like you can do all you want, but like
Yeah.
no, I'm not about it. And then she also just like is physically, you know, she's able to do judo. So
Yeah.
like that's also great as well. But then, you know,
the movie eventually
it
just
just-
has them be together, because movie has to be a movie,
because it
and
has
it's
to
like,
do that.
Yeah,
And I find that so disappointing. Which again,
It doesn't,
like it's a
like, yeah.
60s movie, so you know what? That I think was the only option. Like I guess they couldn't not do that, sadly, in a way. But like come from I
yeah.
can't help
They're
but
like,
have
oh, that's what
my
the people want to see.
yeah.
That's what we usually write. So it's just gonna
Yeah.
be that. I'm
exactly.
like, that's
And I can't help it. And like that's what the audience wanted.
Exactly.
Supposedly. And that's but like now, you know, I'm living in 2020, so I can't help but look at that
and be like, oh god, yeah,
especially the way the scene goes down, where like
yeah.
it's just I mean, I don't want to go so far as to say like it wasn't like rapey by any means, but like at the same time, like he's willing to physically overpower her in order to
Yeah.
get what he wants and satisfy
And
his
it-
sexual desire.
yeah,
Like
and
that's
it's a
literally
matter
what
of,
happens.
like,
She's like, no,
tone.
I'm not interested. Let's go outside. You know, not in this barn where nobody can see or hear me
Yeah.
scream. Which, like, she clearly then defends herself, which I think is awesome. And I thought that was kind of going down a good path where she, like, flips him over. Impressive. But then he flips her over, and I'm like, okay. And then they
I
go
mean,
back and forth.
I
And then
think-
she's, like,
Yeah.
finally, like, really, you know, thrown down. And then he gets on top of her, and he's, like, kissing her and kind of forcing himself on her. And she's like, no, no, no. Okay.
But like, there's no logic to
Exactly,
that.
there's
That's
no logic,
the
'cause,
problem.
like, the
It's
way-
like the tone
Yeah.
that comes off afterwards, like is not what should come off of it, like the way people see it.
Because, like, there's definitely, like, I think there's situations which, I mean, I still am not totally on board with when portraying romantic relationships, but had they gone the route of, like, they were kind of, like, sparring a little bit, like, their intelligence was clashing, and, like, their skills, and they kind of had flirting back and forth, like, you could see a romantic attachment, then maybe I could get on board. Yeah. But the entire time, she's like, no.
For a good amount of time, that is the role of the Bond girl, you know? Just poorly written and meant to sell seats, you know, in the theater.
And succumb to Bond's debonair.
Pretty much, because they're trying to show him as like a really like just sex symbol. Is Sean Connery a sex symbol? I'm like, I don't know. The chest hair is a turn off for me personally.
All he needs is the male symbol chain around his neck.
Bringing it back to Austin Powers.
Literally, though, like that's just.
Yeah, and that's the difference. Yeah. Austin Powers plays that misogyny for laughs, and James Bond and like Goldfinger's trying to have it be serious. But you know, moving on from the Bond girl, I think you know important to talk about the Bond villain.
Oh yeah,
you know,
begin.
Goldfinger, the man himself,
with the heart of gold, which is cold.
Goldfinger. No. I was in preparation for watching this movie. I was singing just the word Goldfinger around my sister's apartment for like 10 minutes.
Planted the seed.
I was so ready. I was so pumped. But I think this is, kind of the first time, at least, I mean, for me, knowing the franchise, this is one of the first times I think we really see the archetypal Bond villain come into place, which is kind of this idea of espousing you're doing the evil character monologue, you know, having the confidence and bravado to kind of be untouchable, have an army around you that Bond has to infiltrate, and eventually like you kind of have this kind of fun tete-a-tete, like you look at the golf scene when they're playing golf, and it's like, oh, they're kind of like subvertingly one-upping each other, and then you have just Goldfinger eventually capturing Bond and being like, I expect you to die. And I'm like, oh, what a great line. But yeah. And also his plan, his like over crazy irradiating all the gold in America plan is like classic Bond. Like it's so over the top.
But I liked it though.
Oh, but I'm the same. Like it works really good.
And it was
so well.
It was appropriate for the time as well. Like you know, whole like atomic bombs and radiation were very much a thing at that
Cold
time.
War,
so
I think it's just interesting to like look back. I try and put myself in the seat. Like if I'm seeing this in 1963, I think my mind's getting blown because I'm like, whoa! Like the way they explain it is kind of the idea of, oh, this actually might happen. Like, oh, like when Goldfinger explains his plan, it seems plausible. Yeah. Like, oh, you put a nuclear device in Fort Knox and you knock everybody out with knockout gas, and then you just drive in and blow it up and irradiate all the gold and no one can get to it. There we go, you know? And I'm like, would that work? Like sometimes there's those movies where you're like, wait, could someone actually do that?
Or even not like, even if they could actually do it, but if someone did just do it, like, would it work? I mean, obviously, we're not using the gold standard anymore. No. So I guess that's kind of not...
We're on silver, the silver standard. I'm not sure if you guys know that. It's switched.
That's true.
I mean, are there any other archetypes you want to talk about? Odd Job, obviously.
Yeah, we can talk about him
absolutely
real quick. Because I guess I was first introduced to him in Austin Powers. Oh. Sorry. I'll stop talking about Austin Powers. No, but like, he's a dude. He's like a guy.
Care to elaborate on that, other than his gender and the fact he exists?
Well, yes, I would. No, I just think that I guess I love how he has. I don't know if I love that he has no lines, but it's effective, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah,
he definitely works as like the silent muscle.
What makes me hesitate is that he's like an ethnic minority. But at the same time, though, like stepping back from that, I think he's a very effective character in that he's like this big, muscly dude that doesn't need to say a thing, but he acts through his facial expressions and his bodily movements, and I think that's impressive, and I think that's cool. Yeah. So,
I think overall, when I'm considering this movie, and I think the impact it had on the Bond franchise and like moving forward, and just kind of like as a snapshot of both 60s culture and 60s cinema, you know, for the time, this movie did so many things right and so many things wrong all at the same time. You know, I mean, you kind of look at the writing, which is like the character writing and is inherently flawed, but then you look at the actual action aspects, which is really what I go to a Bond movie for. You know, I want to just shove the misogyny aside and like get to the explosions and the amazing production design and like all of this really cool, like the sets and the cinematography and like the action and like the creative ideas of like international spy world. Like that's the best part. And I think that's what this movie like not only sets the gold standard for, but like I think, you know, kind of elevates it to like a really fun movie watching experience, even though it's like constantly bogged down by like just kind of lackluster characters and flawed gender dynamics and really racial dynamics as well to an extent. So yeah. I do have a question. Were you able to figure out where Goldfinger is from? What's his accent?
Oh, you know, I only noticed that halfway through the film as well, because I just assumed he was
always like German. Is he Swiss? Like I don't.
Yeah, it seems to be a nondescript European accent.
Because there's a point when it says he's an American. Well, then no, he's a British, but he works in America. But you wouldn't know he was British. I'm like, I wouldn't know he was anything.
Yeah,
like,
I know. I mean, I almost wanted to say like German. But like,
he came off as German for me. I know, honestly,
but wouldn't he have had more of a reaction to the Nazi gold that was thrown in front of his feet? I don't know. Like, maybe not.
Maybe his brow would have been a bit sweatier.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, yes.
Yeah.
But apparently, I don't
yeah,
know. I'm not sure. I think
that was so bizarre to me that they like I could never pin down what he was.
He's the
like,
true international man of mystery.
Goldfinger?
Yes.
Goldfinger! Yeah. No, he's the title character, so who knows? It looks like we are coming to the end. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to watch Goldfinger, it is available somewhere. Maybe you own it, I don't know. But if you want to hear more about some of our thoughts on movies and whatnot, you can always visit Connor's Letterboxd. That is Cranberry18, CRAND Berry 18 on Letterboxd. Thank you so much for listening in. You will hear from us eventually, soon. Julia, thank you so much again for joining us.
You're welcome.
On this Goldfinger discussion. And we will, see you guys soon. Goldfinger!